Hey guys, it's Rachel from the Littering Lamb, and today I am doing a live video book review. I've never done one of these in the past, but this I've been really transitioning, trying to find a good balance between making videos and getting everything done in my life. And in this journey of trying to do that, I figured that if I didn't have time to film the review, I would film a live review of it on the day of, just because I do want to get this content up, and I feel like I am personally being lazy with it, and I don't know what the block is and why I am. So this is going to be the book review. So this one was requested for me to review, and I was definitely going to review. It's a very difficult one for me to review because if you've watched my videos, you know I usually don't review memoirs because I'm like, it's kind of me judging. Like, I can talk about the writing, but when it comes to plot and stuff, it's like, am I judging their life? But this book is very interesting, and the fact that it's made up of the author's real life, so her memoir, and the story of this murder in this small town. So the book, as I've said before, is The Fact of a Body by Alexandria Marzano-Lesnevich. And I was really excited to read this book. I had seen it advertised on Goodreads, which is where I originally found this book, and it immediately intrigued me. I'm going to be putting my phone also down, so you're just going to see a black screen until I talk about the cover and all that, just so I'm not shaking, and, then you can just listen to my voice, I guess, and multitask. Works for everybody. So basically, this book was one that was my last read of the year and technically my first read of this year. I'm just going to read, I don't know where I can read. There's really no description. So I'm just going to read basically the little tagline. A young law student, an unspeakable crime, and a past that refuses to stay buried. So Alexandria talks about her past as she does have some stuff in her past. Like, she talks about the idyllic moments, but she also talks about the bad moments. And then she compares stuff that has happened in her life and an experience that she unwillingly had, and kind of looks at that perspective in that person, the decisions of that person, in comparison to this murder case in this small town. And each chapter goes back and forth from her memoir to the murder case. And she does, like, I did read the footnote, she does have like artistic liberties where she makes the case more story-esque, where she'll be like, instead of being like, it was a stormy day, she'd be like, it was a stormy day and the wind was blowing. Like, she'd really make the image come alive, even though that stuff is not recorded. She kind of had some liberties with that, but the facts of the case are accurate. She does have notes in the back of the book or sources consulted in the back of the book. And this one really just, it was really good, but also is probably the worst book to read around this time because, like, this book definitely deals with a murder, and it's not only does you see the author kind of come to terms with somebody that she was close to, and the stuff they've done, but it's also because I had a family death that happened in the middle of me reading this, and it kind of dampened my mood of reading this because I didn't want to be thinking about death, and this book was, all it was an analysis on this one death and the decisions surrounding it. But I found this memoir style very unique. I could be, like, when I say I have not seen something, I don't mean it generally because I know I can sound pretty ignorant in the fact that it's like, oh, I haven't seen it, so it must not exist. But for me, personally, I find this memoir to be very unique, and I really loved how it was half memoir, half focusing on a murder case, like true crime. I think that was a very digestible way, especially if you're a scaredy cat like me and like to be more ignorant to stuff. It was like you're getting thrown to this case that's very like gross and seedy and like really horrible, horrible stuff. But then you have mixed with her memoir, which is very interesting and does have some of those grim elements. So you'll read maybe a chapter of the murder case where it's lighter and then a darker part of her memoir. And it kind of goes back and forth, so you kind of get a breather. And I found myself, whenever I was reading about the memoir, I wanted to hear more about the murder. When I was reading about the murder, I wanted to get back to the memoir. So it was that constant tug and pull, which I love. You're never like, oh, I just don't care about her life, or oh, I just don't care about the murder. It was that kind of back and forth motion. So for plot, I gave the book a 4 out of 5. There's some parts I found a bit slow. I found the case was maybe a bit dragged out, but I get why, because this wasn't a book about this murder case and seeing who was right and who was wrong, because it's a murder case. The murder case was analyzed in a way that was analyzing the character of Ricky, the murderer, and it was analyzing his motivations. And she was taking his motivations in this murder case and applying it to something that happened in her life so she could understand the characters of her own life. And I found that very interesting. It definitely was a more character study, true crime slash memoir. She was really delving into certain aspects of people's behaviors, which I found very interesting. I don't want to say much about the case and the murder because that's when I'm being a little bit cagey because I don't want to give too much away. But I really like that. There was a slow parts and some parts that weren't as riveting because it was more of a character study. And I've never really read a crime story where there's been character study in it. Personally, because I don't read a lot of that genre, so it was something new I hadn't been exposed to. Like usually when I read a book of a crime, it's like Gone Girl or something like that, where we're looking at character, but it's very much plot driven. Characters or people in this case, I gave a 4.5 to 5. I found the author's look into her own life was very refreshing. She was able to see she had so much more perspective, like because she gave us kind of perspective when she was a child. She thought this, but when she grew up, she looked at the situation differently, and I really just loved her. I just really admired the way that she was so forthcoming, and she didn't gloss over anything, and like was a very down to earth, which I really do enjoy to memoir. I don't like when it's like, oh, I did this. This is so shiny. Like even when she was talking about her accomplishments, she was very down to earth. But even the childhood that she was describing and stuff like that, like she was able to she's able to be objective about it, which is very difficult because obviously if you're in the situation, it's very subjective. Like I have a very different look on my childhood in comparison to maybe my parents or my other siblings, but she was able to look at it objectively and subjectively, and I really like that. In the case of the murder, I found the characters to be very complex. I really, really enjoyed looking back at Ricky's family line and looking at his parents' life and looking at his life earlier, and not just the murder case, but seeing how this personality, these traits developed in him. Were they developed in him? Was he born with certain traits and certain inclinations? Especially because we found out part of the reason why people suspect he did some of this stuff is because of the mom was on very heavy medication because of an accident, and it goes into that kind of medical sphere too, while at the same time not being bogged down by facts about medicine. Cover, I give a 5 to 5. I'm just going to show the cover. I really enjoy this cover. I really love how it's like peeling off the wallpaper, a new layer it represents, and even like childhood, it's like your childhood wallpaper, new wallpaper, like that kind of thing. Also, that change is inevitable. I just think it represents so much. I really love how it's like curling right there. I love the font changes on both sides, and it says a murder and a memoir. It gets right to the point. The back's not too exciting. It's just this nice red tone, and the spine's kind of the same, but I really love this cover. It definitely made it stand out. I was on one of those Goodreads emails where they're like, all these new books, and I saw this cover, and that cover is definitely something that influences not my purchasing necessarily, but definitely if I'm going to look at a book or not. And we had two last categories. I didn't even explain the categories like I normally do, live reviews. Anyway, suspense. Suspense I gave a 4 to 5. I kind of talked about this earlier when I talked about the plot, but I found it moved pretty well. There were some parts that didn't pique my interest so much, and that sounds really bad to say, but it is a book and I am consuming it. It's not that the story was boring, it was just maybe, and it might have just been me, but I found some parts were a bit slow moving. And overall, for rereadability, whether I read it 5 to 5 very soon, not so soon, 1 out of 5, I picked 4 out of 5 because this book was an interesting character study. If you know me, you know I love character studies. I love knowing why people do stuff. I have some people in my life that I don't understand their motivation. Like, I can think about it and understand it, but I don't really, really understand it. I don't have a grasp on it. So I find it interesting to find out people's motivations because no matter if it's like a murder case, which obviously I can't relate to and I don't want to relate to, but any character study where we're finding out how people's kind of origins and how they are shaped by their surroundings, I find very interesting because it makes me reflect on my surroundings and how I was shaped and how I am. And it kind of gives me that outside perspective looking in where I'm not so self-consumed with myself and thinking on one way. I can objectively look at myself from somebody else's point of view. And I find that very important. It's something I like to go back to. This book was also done in an interesting format where we learned two different things and there was a lot to keep hold of, so it definitely has that rereadability where you could reread it and maybe sense something else and get some more lessons and morals kind of ground out. Not that it's beating you over the head with morals, but I feel like most books, even if they say like, oh, it's a fantasy book, like what morals can you find? There's morals everywhere and everything you can derive a lesson from. And this book was definitely one of them. So that has been my very long, Jeepers the time, book review, The Fact of a Body by Alexandria Marzano-Lesnevich. I really enjoy doing these live reviews. Yeah, I wasn't showing my face and doing all that, but I find sometimes with that I can have more coherent thoughts because I'm not focusing on, am I in frame? How long is how long am I like? It's just more chill. So if you guys like this and would like me to do some of this format for other books, not all the books, but if you have some that you think like you might want to see me do a live review, or if you want me to go back to regular. I'm definitely not abandoning regular reviews, but if you think, every once in a while, maybe like if you want to throw a bonus video in the week, like let's say I want to do a review on a Tuesday and I just did a live review, would you guys be fine with that? Definitely let me know, and I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.